Support for Colorado Today comes from Credit Union of Colorado. With access to over 30,000 ATMs and a mobile app, they're dedicated to offering the services of a big bank with a heart. Learn more at honestlygood.org.
Support for Colorado Today comes from Safeway. Shop online and get $30 off your first online order when you use code SAVE30 at checkout. Get the same prices, deals, and rewards as in-store. Get started at Safeway.com or the Safeway app.
Fires on the western slope are growing. So much so that Governor Polis has now called in the National Guard to help. The city of Meeker is the one that is closest to the danger. The biggest blaze is right next to them, called the Lee Fire. For context, that fire is more than a quarter size of the largest fire ever in Colorado, and it has grown fast over the last couple of days. Do what you can to stay safe, wherever you are. I'm Arlo Pérez Esquivel. Coming up, ICE agents shot at a car and then silence.
ICE shootings have a very obvious pattern when you look into the history of them.
It fits a pattern of behavior. Then Colorado's getting sued over one of its new laws on gas stoves.
We looked at this bill as an opportunity not to take away a consumer's choice, but to encourage them to make an informed decisions that are going to have a benefit for the health of their families.
Plus, the Colorado Springs Philharmonic will make history.
When we start taking risks, it's where the emotion comes and where we all go out at the concert and say, wow.
It's Friday, August 8th. Here's the news in Colorado today. You're going to get an update now on a story that you first heard here last week, when we told you that an ICE officer shot at a car when they were pursuing two men in rural El Paso County, north of Colorado Springs. Officials said that the driver revved his engine and tried to run over ICE officers. And at first, they said both men were on the run. But we've now learned that some of that information was false. One of the men, Francisco Zapata Pacheco, is said to be cooperating with ICE and is in custody for immigration proceedings. Officials said that the second man, Jose Mendez Chavez, is a Mexican immigrant with prior convictions for child abuse and domestic violence and is still on the run. A week later, ICE has not provided any new information. But given how active immigration enforcement is right now, we wanted to bring you more information on how often ICE shoots at people and uses force in these operations. Laila Hassan is an independent investigative journalist who spent 4 years tracking down that information nationwide. Laila, how does this incident that happened in Colorado last week square up with your reporting?
It squares up almost exactly as you would expect it to. ICE shootings have a very obvious pattern when you look into the history of them, and that's often ICE acting in self-defense or in the pursuit of some sort of arrest. Either way, there's some sort of legal enforcement action that sort of justifies their actions, or there is a safety and risk issue that justifies their actions as well. But what's interesting about this case that you've just described is that they've violated policy that's incredibly new and well-established in ICE's use of force policies, and that's not shooting at or from moving vehicles and not endangering bystanders.
Now, let's take a step back. What kind of data have you compiled during your reporting, and what have you learned?
I compiled every single instance of ICE immigrations officers or ICE officers shooting, because they're in two different divisions. One is enforcement and removals, and the other is Homeland Security investigations. But altogether, they make up immigrations and customs enforcements. I obtained every single shooting that happened during the Trump administration and 2 years into the last Biden administration. I analyzed every single one of these shootings wherever there was public information possible, whether that was in court documents, police documents, local law enforcement investigations, or media reporting. And I found ICE agents, for one, were never indicted for that behavior in whatever jurisdictions where they may have shot at people. And wherever people did try and issue lawsuits against them, ICE never admitted to wrongdoing, and every single one of those lawsuits was unsuccessful.
And now, I just want to understand this a little bit better. Does ICE train its agents to use guns versus other methods to detain someone?
Well, they're taught to use guns because they are an armed law enforcement base. They have to go through a gun safety training. For the most part, the training documents that I reviewed, which are from the years 2006 to 2011, one might say that these might be outdated, but actually these are the training documents from when the Department of Homeland Security was established in 2003, and it informed a generation of ICE agents that are still currently out on the streets. And so these training documents did not mention de-escalation. It was not nearly as important as how to justify and articulate what was done in the field. That is something that came up time and time again. The training documents that I obtained are not necessarily the entire breadth of their curriculum, but wherever there was a mention of use of deadly force, there was also a mention of potential legal repercussions that these ICE agents would face, and not only that, but how to get out of them. I found a podcast that's actually publicly available on Spotify, Apple Music, anywhere where you listen to podcasts, of ICE agents recruiting new agents, telling them that if anybody were to ask them what it's like to work in the field, they would tell them, I don't expect you to get in trouble for what you do in the field. I expect you to get in trouble for what you don't know how to articulate, for what you've done in the field.
Well, let's talk a little bit about that. It's unusual to hear stories of ICE officers shooting. At the same time, though, in your reporting, you documented 23 people who were shot by ICE officers from 2015 to 2021. Dozens of others were injured. Is there an investigation for uses of force and whether they are necessary or not?
Yes and no. There's always an investigation into the actual matter of what happened with the use of deadly force. Like I mentioned, the training documents let them know that they can use it pretty swiftly and pretty quickly if they feel like they're in danger. And that rationale pretty much protects them from any potential disciplinary issues. Where they're investigated is whether or not they violated their own agency's policies. And if they violated their policies, that triggers a whole range of investigations that happens internally that not a lot of people know about, because there's no legal obligation to actually disclose what those internal policies and disciplinary issues look like.
Lila, you spent 4 years reporting on this story. Why exactly did it take so long?
It took me 4 years because I was essentially following a trail of breadcrumbs, looking through all of the different lawsuits that I was able to identify and understanding ICE's inner workings from the documents that I was able to obtain from my sources. ICE is shrouded in secrecy. ICE is one of the most opaque federal law enforcement agencies you could investigate in the U.S. And it's ironic because they're the largest law enforcement agency in the U.S. The only thing larger than them is the NYPD. But there is, for one, no legal obligation or even public outcry to obtain their internal documents. That's a problem, according to activists and lawyers that I spoke with, because you can never really begin to update training. You can never update their policy. You can never even review whether or not their new and updated policies match updated research and updated understandings of how law enforcement should engage with civilians or even criminals, or in this case, undocumented immigrants that may or may not even have a warrant out for their arrest.
Lila Hassan, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
You may have heard here about a new law that requires health warnings on gas stoves and ranges. But you may not actually see those labels in stores, at least yet. Almost immediately after the law took effect, Colorado has drawn a lawsuit from industries affected by this law, which is the first of its kind in the country. CPR Sam Brash is here with more. First, Sam, you went shopping to see if these appliances really carry labels right now. What did you find?
Yeah, I just need any excuse I can find to go to Home Depot. So yeah, on Wednesday afternoon, I stopped by a Home Depot in South Denver on my way home. I went to the appliance section and, looking at one gas stove made by LG. I don't see a yellow warning label on it, but I can get a 2-year limited warranty. Yeah, a few other stoves here. I'm not seeing any warning labels of any kind. It doesn't seem like they're here right now. That led me to ask the state, are you enforcing this new labeling law? Like, what happens if these stoves aren't properly labeled with the health warnings we've been talking about? And they said they couldn't say much because there's pending litigation.
Who exactly filed the lawsuit and when?
I found out that they filed it on Wednesday, the same day the law took effect, so it was right away. And it came from the Association of Home Appliance Manufacturers. That's obviously a trade group that represents the people who make stoves and fridges and everything else. It asks a federal court to immediately stop Colorado from enforcing this new labeling law. And they say that's because it violates the First Amendment by forcing appliances to mislead consumers about the health risks of gas stoves.
Okay, at this point, let's back up and explain, what are the labels supposed to say?
So the label should be a yellow sticker with just a big bold statement that says, understand the air quality implications of having an indoor gas stove. And then you should see a URL or a QR code that takes you to a web page the state maintains with more information and links to peer-reviewed studies. And these should appear both in brick and mortar stores and on online retailers.
So what exactly is the health danger that they're warning about?
Recent studies have confirmed what scientists have known for a long time. Gas stoves release gases. When they burn something, one of the main gases they release is nitrogen dioxide, and that's known to exacerbate asthma and increase the risk of asthma development.
And Colorado's the first state to require those labels.
That's right. Similar bills have been proposed in states like California and Massachusetts. Colorado is the only place where it's made it into law. That's according to Nick Torres, an advocate with the American Lung Association.
We looked at this bill as an opportunity not to take away a consumer's choice, but to encourage them to make an informed decisions that are going to have a benefit for the health of their families.
But the industry says that the warnings are misleading. Why do they say that?
So they argue that there's no scientific consensus that gas stoves cause health issues. And here's the thing, that's kind of true, but it's also really similar to the tactics that tobacco companies used to mislead consumers about the risks of smoking cigarettes. So yeah, there's no scientific consensus yet about whether gas stoves cause asthma, but think about what that would take. It would probably take putting a family in a room with the gas stove for a prolonged period of time and seeing if that makes their asthma worse, if they develop asthma. That's obviously unethical to do. So you have to work on observational studies, which are a lot trickier. And that's what scientists are still trying to figure out, looking at all these instances of families with gas stoves and whether they actually have higher incidences of different health risks.
So then, going back to the labels, are we going to see them on stoves and ovens in the meantime?
I really don't know. Like I said, I emailed the state attorney general's office to ask if they were going to enforce this law. They declined to comment due to that pending litigation. So this is where I could really use help from the listeners of this podcast. If anyone sees one of these labels out in the wild, please let us know.
CPR Sam Brash, thank you.
Thank you.
A world that relishes in the past is trying something new. Next month, French conductor Chloé Dufresne makes history as the first woman to lead the Colorado Springs Philharmonic.
For me, it's just the natural next step in the career. But I'm still very grateful that all the players were trusting me, because this is something in the society also. How do we trust the leaders? And are we able to imagine women in these positions?
Dufresne plays viola, and she's a trained singer. She worked with orchestras across Europe, but this marks her first time serving as a music director.
Having a whole season to plan and map is very fun, and it allows my artistry to flourish.
She wants to take her artistry and the Philharmonic to the next level, challenging herself and her musicians to try new things.
When we start taking risks, it's where the emotion comes and where we all go out of the concert and say, wow, this was fun and we really enjoyed and something happened. It's a good quality of the orchestra.
Dufresne hopes audiences feel that fearlessness in the live music when the Colorado Springs Philharmonic's new season starts in September.
I think they should come back and have learned something, have been touched by something like emotionally, and also that they feel that they should do that more often.
She'll begin the season with a piece close to her native France, The Firebird by Igor Stravinsky.
Why? Because it's a gorgeous piece. Joyful. I think it's a perfect piece to open a season.
If you're into classical music, you can also join us this Sunday in Denver. CPR Classical is offering a special presentation from the Aspen Music Festival and School at the Denver Art Museum. Get more information at the link in our show notes. Reporting for today's show also came from CPR's Haley Sanchez. Have a great weekend. I'm Arlo Perez Esquivel. This is CPR News.
Support for Colorado Today comes from Safeway, where you can make back to school a breeze. Shop lunch essentials, snacking favorites, and even check off vaccinations all in one trip. Get started at Safeway.com or in the Safeway app. Support for Colorado Today comes from Credit Union of Colorado. With access to over 30,000 ATMs and a mobile app, they're dedicated to offering the services of a big bank with a heart. Learn more at honestlygood.org.